Long, long ago, in the great kingdom of Persia, there lived a mighty king. His name was Xerxes. The king threw a huge party that lasted for many, many days. He wanted everyone to see how grand and powerful he was. He called for his wife, Queen Vashti, to come and show her beauty to all his guests. But Queen Vashti said no. This made the king very angry. So angry, in fact, that he declared she would no longer be his queen. The search began for a new queen, a search that would ripple through the entire kingdom and change the course of history for God's people. Across the land, the most beautiful young women were brought to the king's palace. Among them was a young Jewish woman named Esther. She was an orphan, and her kind cousin Mordecai had raised her as his own daughter. Esther was lovely, not just on the outside, but on the inside too. Mordecai told her something very important. "Do not tell anyone that you are a Jew," he whispered. It was a secret she had to keep locked deep in her heart. So Esther went to the palace, a quiet girl with a big secret, and waited with all the others, her heart full of both fear and a little bit of wonder. Esther was gentle and kind to everyone she met. She found favor in the eyes of all who saw her, from the palace keepers to the king himself. When it was her turn to meet King Xerxes, he was completely captivated by her grace and beauty. He loved her more than any of the other women. He placed the royal crown upon her head and made her the new queen of all Persia. No one knew her secret. No one knew she was one of God's chosen people. She was just Queen Esther, the beautiful wife of the mighty king, living in a palace of unimaginable splendor. Meanwhile, her cousin Mordecai sat faithfully at the king's gate every day. He was a good and loyal man. One day he overheard two of the king's officers making a terrible plan. They were plotting to harm the king. Mordecai quickly sent a message to Queen Esther, who told the king everything. The plot was stopped, and the king's life was saved. Mordecai's good deed was written down in the king's special book. But for now, he remained a humble servant at the gate, watching over his beloved Esther from afar, trusting that God had a plan for her. Not long after, the king gave a very high position to a man named Haman. He was a proud and cruel man. The king commanded that everyone should bow down to Haman whenever he passed by. It was the law, and so everyone bowed. Everyone, that is, except for one person. Mordecai, the Jew who sat at the king's gate, would not bow. He would only bow down to God. He knew that his loyalty belonged to the one true king, and not to a prideful man like Haman. This small act of defiance was a brave and dangerous choice. Haman was filled with rage when he saw that Mordecai would not bow. His pride was wounded, and his heart turned black with hatred. How dare this one man disobey him? Haman's anger was so great that he didn't just want to punish Mordecai. He wanted to destroy him completely, and not just him, but all of his people too. He discovered that Mordecai was a Jew, and a wicked, terrible plan began to grow in his heart. He decided he would get rid of all the Jews in the entire Persian kingdom, wiping them out forever. So Haman went to King Xerxes with his deceptive words. "There is a certain group of people scattered throughout your kingdom," he said, his voice like a snake's hiss. "They follow their own laws and do not obey you, my king. It is not in your best interest to let them live." He even offered the king a huge amount of silver to have them destroyed. The king, not knowing the truth, trusted his wicked advisor. He gave Haman his special ring, the one used to seal royal commands. "Do with them as you see fit," the king said, sealing the fate of thousands. A terrible decree was written and sent to every corner of the vast empire. On a single day, the 13th day of the month of Adar, all Jewish people, men, women, and children, were to be killed. Their homes and belongings were to be taken. The message went out on fast horses, spreading fear and sorrow wherever it went. For Haman, it was a day of triumph. For the Jewish people, it was a day that promised only darkness and despair. Their hope seemed lost, and a shadow of death fell over them all. When Mordecai heard the devastating news, his heart broke. He tore his clothes and put on sackcloth and ashes, the signs of deepest grief. He walked through the city crying out with a loud and bitter cry. All across the kingdom, the Jewish people did the same. There was great mourning, fasting, and weeping. Their world had been turned upside down by Haman's hateful plan. Hope felt like a distant memory, a flickering candle in a great and terrible storm. They could only pray and wait, their hearts heavy with dread. Esther soon learned of the sorrow that had gripped her people and her beloved cousin. She sent clothes to Mordecai, but he refused them. He sent a message back to her with a copy of the dreadful decree. He begged her to go to the king. "You must go and plead for our people," his message urged. But Esther was terrified. She sent a reply, reminding him of the law. "No one can go to the king without being called," she explained. "To do so means certain death, unless he holds out his golden scepter." Mordecai's next message was filled with a powerful and urgent truth. It was a message that would change everything. "Do not think that because you are in the palace, you alone will be safe," he wrote. "If you stay silent now, help will come from somewhere else, but you and your family will be lost. And who knows, perhaps you have become queen for such a time as this." His words echoed in Esther's heart. She realized this was her moment. This was why God had placed her in the palace. It was not a coincidence. It was a calling. A new kind of courage filled her soul. It was a courage that came from a deep trust in God's plan. She sent her final message to Mordecai. "Gather all the Jews in the city," she commanded. "Fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days and 3 nights. I and my maids will do the same." She had made her decision. She would face the king no matter the cost. "And if I perish," she declared, with a strength she didn't know she had, "I perish." She was ready to risk her life to save her people. On the 3rd day, Esther put on her most beautiful royal robes. Her heart was pounding, but her spirit was calm. She went and stood in the inner court of the king's palace, right where he could see her from his throne. When the king saw her, his heart softened. He was not angry. Instead, he smiled and held out his golden scepter to her. Esther approached and touched the tip of the scepter. "What is it, Queen Esther?" the king asked kindly. "What is your request? I will give you anything, up to half of my kingdom." Instead of revealing her secret, Esther wisely invited the king and Haman to a special banquet. And then at that banquet, she invited them to another one the next day. It was at the second banquet that she finally spoke her truth. With tears in her eyes, she pleaded, "If I have found favor with you, O king, spare my life and the lives of my people, for we have been sold to be destroyed." The king was shocked. "Who would dare do such a thing?" he demanded. Esther pointed a trembling finger and said, "The adversary and enemy is this wicked Haman." The king's rage was immense. In a series of swift events, Haman's evil plot was unraveled. The very gallows he had built to hang Mordecai became the instrument of his own downfall. The king ordered Haman to be taken away, and his power was broken forever. The king then honored Mordecai, making him his second in command. But the danger was not over. The old decree could not be changed. So the king allowed Mordecai and Esther to write a new one. This new decree gave the Jews the right to defend themselves against their enemies. When the dreaded day arrived, the tables were turned. The Jewish people, with the king's blessing, were able to protect themselves and were victorious over those who sought to harm them. A day that was meant for sorrow became a day of deliverance and joy. To remember this incredible rescue, Mordecai and Esther established a special festival. They called it Purim. To this day, Jewish people all over the world celebrate Purim with feasting, gifts, and happiness. It is a time to remember that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope, and that one person's courage can save a nation.